All right, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of comics that you may want to consider investing some additional dollars into if you already have these books in your collection. And this video is sponsored by the folks that you see on screen right there, comicspriceguide.com, a fantastic resource for not just looking up values of raw books and graded books, but also for organizing your collection and staying in touch with the hobby. Generally speaking, it is a great resource. I encourage you to check them out. But all of the data that we're going to be looking at today comes from comicspriceguide.com. So huge shout out to them. The very first book that we are going to look at is a DC book. This is not necessarily a book that we would readily see on like anyone's hot list, but it is a cool book. It is a book that people may have in their collection that they could invest a few dollars into to see a positive return for their collection, not necessarily to sell, but just to enhance the collection. Action Comics issue number 340 is the first appearance of Parasite. And so I want to make this a little bit larger so that you guys can actually see it. For those that may not have seen this video series before, we use an all-in cost of around $70. That is book acquisition, clean press, grading, shipping to and from. You can adjust your cost based upon the grading company you go with, based upon your acquisition cost and the services that you request, but we're going to use $70 as the line in the sand. So definitely a cool cover right there for DC Comics. I absolutely love those DC books with the checkerboard across the top. But where would I draw the line? Where would I draw the line in terms of, do I send this book in to be graded or do I not? That's what we're going to look at. Comics Price Guide again has data for raw books in this middle column and also graded books on the far side. And as you go down the list, you see some healthy numbers. I mean, a 9.8 has a value of $2,300, which is crazy. When was this book released? Is there a date here? 1966. All right, you go. That's a crazy amount of money. But as you go down the list, as you would imagine, the values began to drop, which kind of sort of makes sense. And the question becomes, where do you draw the line? I personally would draw the line right here at the 5.0. Very fine. I'm sorry, very good to fine. The raw value, $22, but the graded value is $150. You could go a little bit lower to the 4.5, but what I'm trying to create here is a little bit of cushion, right? A little bit of cushion to absorb the variability that comes with the value of comics. So you could even go as low if you wanted down to the 4.0, but if you have an acquisition cost again of $70, you don't have as much cushion there to be able to absorb the ebbs and flows that come with value fluctuations, right? So that's why I opted to set it a little bit higher. The other reason is that well, there's several other reasons, I should say. The overall census count for this book is low. It is a relatively low census count. There are just a total of 508 copies graded by CGC, period, across all grades, across all labels. That is not a lot of copies, which means that there is not a ton of graded copies, much less transactions for those books. So when you start to go lower than the 5.0, the census counts start to get smaller, as do the number of transactions, and in my opinion, the reliability of the actual data. So there's a reason why I put the line there at the 5.0 census count, reliability of data. That's part of the reason. But again, a really cool book. I mean, even at a 5.0, the book has a value of $150, which is not terrible. And again, there's a chance that people actually have copies of this book out there. What I will also say is that this is the first appearance of Parasite. You may have noticed that, and Parasite is getting a little bit of attention. The character appeared earlier in 2023 and some issues of Superman, so there was a little bit of attention there. They changed his power set and made him maybe a little bit more attractive. The DC fans will have to tell me that, but there have been, as of late, some speculation that Parasite could appear in the Superman movie. People are basically saying, move away from Lex Luthor, do something different. And there have been a couple of articles that have come out that have basically said Parasite could be that villain. So again, if people are believing that, if they are buying into that, that could have contributed to the values of this book going to where they are. Again, 5.0 at $150. And if the rumors prove to be untrue, there could be a reduction in that value. Another reason why I wanted to create a little bit of cushion there. So again, just some notes of caution for you. But if you happen to have the book, if you happen to have Action Comics issue number 340 in your collection, this is potentially the type of book that you actually want to send in to be graded, because you're enhancing the value of your collection. The very next book that I want to look at is another book that I don't think would pop up on any type of hot list. It is Fantastic Four issue number 55. And this is, as you can see on screen, an iconic Thing versus Silver Surfer cover by the legendary Jack Kirby. So Jack Kirby is a legend. There's no doubt about it. And this is one of his covers that maybe gets a little less attention than some of the other, maybe Silver Surfer covers, battle covers that we actually see out there. But definitely a cool book that people could have in their collection. And the question becomes, again, as I blow this up a little bit larger, where would you draw the line? A 9.9, $31,000, a 9.8, 18,500, 9.6, 5740. Those are big numbers. But as you go down the list, you can see, as you would expect, the value of this book begins to decline. And I would actually draw the line for this book at the exact same place as the last one, at a 5.0. Very good to fine. You can see it has a value raw at $66, graded $165. And again, I drew the line here for a couple of reasons. When you look at the 4.5, you can see that the value graded drops to $100. And so in my mind, that's not enough cushion there, right? I don't feel comfortable if I'm all in at 70 and the value is 100. That's not enough cushion for me. That's part of the reason why I selected the 5.0 at 165. Another reason is that the census count is also lower for this book as well, which means that when you start to look at the 4.5, the 4.0, the 3.5, the census count gets lower, the number of sales transactions gets lower, and in my mind, the reliability of that data gets a little bit lower, especially when you're not seeing sales in the last 30 days, sometimes in the last 90 days. That doesn't quite sit well with me. The 5.0 is where I feel comfortable drawing the line in the sand for this book. I will also mention that I do believe that Fantastic Four issue number 55 is where we first get to see the Silver Surfer in boxer briefs, to update the term. And I think this depiction of him lasted for quite some time. Before this, I don't think that he was wearing the boxer briefs, but I think it's in this issue that he is actually depicted with some undergarments on. So another little note there for you guys. But again, a cool book. If you happen to have this book, this could be the type of book that you want to spend a couple of dollars on by sending in to be graded by your grading company of choice. So the last book that we are going to look at is this one right here. Conan the Barbarian issue number 1. This could be a book that appears on hot lists, right? Unlike the last two. This is a cool book. It is the first appearance and origin of Conan, no doubt about it. An iconic cover in and of itself that's been homaged a few times over the decades, but definitely a cool book. Shout out to Matt Woods for this one. All right, so as we look at this one, let me make that just a smidge bigger if I can. There we go, a little bit bigger for that one. The 9.8 has a value $7,800. The 9.6 $3,400, and even the raw value $700, which is nothing to sneeze at. But as we go down the list, the question, of course, becomes, where will we draw the line? if you had an all-in cost of around $70 for this book, I would actually draw the line, and I guess you can draw the line a little bit lower here. You can draw it all the way down to a 2.0 to a good. Raw, this book has value of $87. Graded, this book has value of $158. You can see that when it goes to the 1.8, it drops off to as low as $90. So at 158, I feel like there's a little bit of cushion there to absorb the variability. Conan is a great book, right? I mean, anytime you have an origin and a first appearance and a dope cover, like that's a huge win, right? So again, going to a 2.0 for this one, I feel comfortable with that because of what this book actually is, right? This is not just a cool cover like Fantastic 455. This is an origin and a first appearance, and there is sales data, and I think a healthy amount of sales data down to that 2.0. Now, what I will say is that as you look at some of the census data below the 2.5, certainly below the 2.0, the data gets a little wonky in terms of number of graded copies, number of transactions. It gets a little bit wonky, but again, I feel a little more comfortable about the wonkiness with this book because of what this book is. So a really cool book that I don't have. I actually do not have this comic in my collection. I don't read a ton of Conan, but I've heard some wonderful things about not just the character, but about the comics that are currently coming out featuring Conan. So this may be something that I have to take a look at in 2024. So there you have it. A couple of really cool books that if you have in your collection, you may want to consider sending in to be graded. Action Comics issue number 340. Fantastic Four issue number 55, and last but not least, Conan issue number 1. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I want to invite you to do so now. Go ahead and tap that button, turn on notifications, and that way you won't miss out on any of the content. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. Just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yo, should you practice art, or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it, not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know, the one that's gonna be a master, the one that's more than a rapper, the one that's an educator, the one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts, he's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan, straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations, synergy and combination.